So welcome back. There were some comments after the first panel that some of the people on the panel, whilst having great ideas, perhaps would not have their ideas, would not be able to be translated to being in academia. So now we have a panel who are academics, and they can certainly address some of these questions as well. So let me introduce them first. To my left is Elisa Riedo, who recently joined the Advanced Science Research Center here in the Nanoscience Initiative. She came from Georgia Tech and is also now Professor of Physics at City College of CUNY. Elisa has carried out pioneering work in thermochemical nanolithography, and early in her career she was selected as a highly creative researcher in nanoscience and nanotechnology for the project on creativity, capabilities, and the promotion of highly innovative research. In 2014, she was elected a Fellow of the American Physical Society. To her left is Michal, and I'm not going to read out the entire bios for these wonderful scientists because it would take me all of the panel time, but you can read up more on them in the program. Michal is Professor of Electrical Engineering at Columbia University as of earlier this year. Prior to that, she was the Giffen Foundation Professor of Engineering at Cornell University. I should mention that among her many awards, in 2010, she was named a MacArthur Fellow, or the so-called Genius Award, and that same year, she received the Blavatnik Award for Young Scientists. And you will have not failed to grab your attention that we have a gentleman joining us. Ulijn is the Director of the Nanoscience Initiative here at the ASRC, and also he is Einstein Professor of Chemistry at Hunter College of CUNY. Rein joined CUNY from the University of Strathclyde in Scotland. And I will mention in 2014, he won the Royal Society Wolfson Merit Award. And that same year, he was elected to the Fellowship of the Royal Society of Edinburgh, which is Scotland's National Academy of Science. And so welcome to all three of you. I think a good place to start, just so that people get to know you a little, is if you could each talk for a few minutes, 3 or 4 minutes, about your own career paths that have brought you to where you are today. So I'll start with to my left here, Elisa, if you could just tell us a little bit about your career track.
Okay. So I thought a little bit about what to say, since I expected something about my career path in this panel. So I decided to highlight a few moments of why I'm here in the end. So I would say that one key point was during my early childhood, when I was 10 years old, and that was the moment I read a biography about Albert Einstein, and these were letters that he wrote during the Second World War II, and they were very inspiring, so inspiring that I decided I wanted to be a physicist. And that, I think, is an indication of how sometimes, really out of the blue, you see an inspiring person, an inspiring talk, and this can change how you define your career. And so, in fact, I would say that since then, I always had this dream in mind, and I kept it. So I graduated in physics at the University of Milan. And after the graduation, I wasn't sure anymore if I wanted to stay in physics as in academia, or maybe to change and go in a different in industry, or choose a different path. And so what I did, I sent about 100 letters with my CV, because I tried to be like very broad, and that was kind of funny, because one of these letters happened that arrived to, it was supposed to be a company, but the company moved out from this building, and in this building now there was a new research center between the University of Milan and the Pirelli. At the time, they were a strong effort in telecommunication. Mm-hmm. And so they called me and say, wow, we just opened, we didn't advertise yet. How do you know? and say, well, are you interested? I say, well, I don't know, because actually I thought there was a company. So they invited me there. I went, and that was really very interesting. I really like it. And I decided to go back. I say this is a sign from the destiny that I'm meant to be there. And then I did my PhD. I moved to France, my postdoc in Switzerland, and then I went to Georgia Tech, where I've been. So I started as assistant professor, and I became associate professor, full professor, and then it was the time for another change. And so in August this year, I moved here in New York, and I hope new beautiful things will happen at the ASRC.
Thank you. Okay. Michal, can you tell us?
I was born in Israel and grew up in Brazil, and I'm a daughter of a cosmologist, physicist, who was convinced that this is the best profession in the world, and really didn't give neither me or I have a twin sister, any other option. So we did our undergrad in physics, both of us, in University of São Paulo. To be completely honest, it was very hard. I was very good in math, but it was not, there are some, I see my son, that physics comes to him so easy. He didn't. And he kept saying, you stick to it, you stick to it. My father, and I did my master and my PhD, and when it was time for my PhD, I completely fell in love with the subject. But it was a long time until I really fell in love with it. And when you fall in love, then you excel, and then everything goes really well. And then I did a postdoc here in the US in MIT, and then was at Cornell for 14 years, and now at Columbia.
And for you, Rein?
Yeah, so first of all, I would like to just say, I feel actually now that having seen the amazing first session earlier on, that I feel okay being here now because a lot of stuff that was said completely resonated with me, and in my view, many of these things are maybe not so different, but that's maybe something we can talk about. At least what I heard, there was a lot of resonance. So my career path, I remember the day when I was in secondary school and learned about biology having some logic to it. So this was when I learned about Mendel genetics, and I thought, wait a minute, math and biology goes together. This to me was just the most amazing thing, that something as complex as biology ultimately comes down to rules that we ultimately may be able to understand. So that was for me a moment. I think I knew I wanted to be a scientist from that moment, and then I ended up doing my degree in biotechnology in the Netherlands, where I'm from. And then I learned, well, this is all great, but actually it's all about molecules, and I don't know enough about molecules. So then I wanted to do a PhD in chemistry. So I wanted to go to the US because I thought that was going to be really cool. So I wanted to go to the US. I looked on what I could find in terms of possible places that could host me. And there was this one professor, Peter Halling, at the University of Strathclyde that I'd never heard of, but it sounded English, so it must be in the US. So I so I applied and got in and ended up in Scotland, which was amazing. So I was there, did my PhD and enjoyed it a lot, and then I stayed in Scotland. I went to Edinburgh for my postdoc, and then I started to look for faculty position. And in Europe, there's differences and similarities, but it's hard, just like here. And I started off looking for the obvious. I now had a PhD in chemistry, so I wanted to be a assistant professor in chemistry. So I applied for a job at the University of St Andrews, which is a nice university in Scotland again. And I was interviewed, and it didn't work out. So I was a little bit distraught, and I thought, okay, what next? Clearly I have a CV that gets me interviews, but this didn't work out. So then I saw this job advertised at the University of Manchester in the area of material science, and I knew very little about material science. But I thought, they're looking for something new and different, and they talk about cross-disciplinarity. I'm just going to apply and see what happens. So I applied and I got the job. And since then, it really opened my eyes to cross-disciplinarity, to this idea of, there's no point in trying to know everything yourself. Actually working with people to learn and explore new things is the most amazing thing. So that was great. So then at some point I felt my wife is Scottish, so that explains my next move. We were in Manchester and we wanted to go back to Scotland, so I ended up back at the University of Strathclyde. Was super happy there. It went extremely well, but then this opportunity came, and it was hard to leave my job. But I've been here a year now, and the family settled, and it's been really amazing. So that's how I ended up where I am today.
So I'm going to ask you, obviously, some questions to probe your careers, your experiences. But there's something I want to start with to get it off the table, and that is from my own experience. And I can almost guarantee that for Elisa and for you, Michal, one of the questions that you get asked most is, how do you balance your career and your family life? Rein, how often have you been asked that question?
Never. Now, this is the first time. But yeah, of course. I mean, it's.
So my point is, all four of us up here have children. All four of us have family lives, and all four of us have careers that we have to balance. And women get asked this question, and men do not. And my advice is just deal with it, because it's going to get asked. There isn't a real good answer. There's no, you have to balance it. The fact that women get asked and men don't is completely unfair, but it's a fact. And I think, I don't know, how would you answer it? How do you answer it?
How do I answer it?
Mm-hmm.
Well, it depends. Short answer, long answer.
Short answer.
Short answer with some help from the husband, and organizing my life every day as best as possible.
I think the point is that you have to be organized, and you have to have, you have these challenges. The fact that when women go to take care of their kids, they get questioned on it, and when men go to do it, they are the superhero. I think we just have to deal with it, and let's move on. But I wanted to say that because I'm sure it was going to come as a question, and I think...
but you can always, if a man asks you, you can always ask, how do you deal with it?
Exactly. That's a good point. That's a good point. So, Michal, let me start with you. Most people that get to the stage in their careers that you have, if any do, have had some mentors on the way, and maybe some detractors. So could you tell us a little bit about, have your colleagues been mentors to you? Have they helped, or have they tried to deter you from taking this path as you go along?
So that's a good question. So I should say that when I started my assistant professor position, I was assigned, like in many universities, I was assigned a mentor. And it was a disaster. I used to dread meeting with him. He was a wonderful person, but there was just a total mismatch. The different fields, I felt that wasn't really contributing much. But I had many mentors, and I definitely seeked them. I was lucky to have a fantastic mentor that I was just my father, just fantastic mentor. But he didn't know, he was in general mentor. He kept saying, keep pushing, aim far, but a specific mentor that knows exactly what needs to be done when was my postdoc advisor. He was just very, very good in terms of teaching me the rules of the game. How does it work? How do you apply for grants? I mean, I came from Israel. I didn't know anything. And also specific colleagues at Cornell, not necessarily in my department, that I looked up and just invited for lunch, and I felt comfortable enough to go to them and say, hey, I'm thinking of doing a review paper. Do you think, how much does that really help? That's a lot of work. For example, that's just an example of a question that I would ask.
And have there been people who have not been encouraging along the way?
So I actually told the story before that when I was, so I started a field called silicon photonics, which is photonics for microelectronic applications, optics for microelectronic applications. And the field started 15 years ago. It was completely unknown when I started, so it was very risky. So when I came up for a 3-year review, I got an awful letter, basically saying, you know, you should move out of the field. And this was after I had already a Nature paper, so I was definitely recognized. But within the department, it was tough. It was tough.
Did you ever feel why that was? Do you think that was a gender issue, or do you think that was just competitiveness?
I honestly don't think that there was any maliciousness. There was no malice there. It just, I think if it was a young man, they might have given the benefit of the doubt. Because you can imagine, you know, a young, courageous man. It's just hard to imagine this for a woman. You know, this superstar, future Feynman. It just doesn't exist for
we
a
only
woman.
have Marie Curie.
Yes, exactly.
Everybody go back, Marie
Role
Curie.
model for everybody. It's true. Elisa, let me pick up with you. I mean, I'm sure like Michal, I'm sure this is true for Michal, though we haven't discussed it, but I'm sure it's true for you. I think you have mentioned this, that quite often you're one of very few women in a meeting or at seminars and outside meetings. Do you think the men around you understand who you are and support you as an equal, or do you think some of them have misconceptions about you, and if so, what?
Yeah, okay. Yes, I think there are definitely misconceptions because as she was saying, I think there are not too many women or not enough women in physics or engineering, so they are not used to see a young woman. Also, when I came, from Italy, I think I could see like, oh, poor little girl, what she's going to do now. But, I was like all the others. I applied, for example, for my NSF usual proposal, and I got funded. And I remember people coming in my office telling me, yeah, but don't think this is just happened, it's an accident, but, don't now think that things will be easy for you because I don't know how it happened. Okay. And so it was really over and over. I know that people has the idea that or we are not enough prepared, or simply I think they cannot see us as maybe in leadership role. I had this issue, or they don't think we are enough tough just because we are maybe smiling or women. They think we cannot be tough, but I think we can as much as men in the end.
So how do you deal with that when you get that sort of reaction?
Well, I think just being myself, so trying to do the best that I can to show that I am competent, that I know what I'm talking about, and trying to also not to be intimidated. So if I have to say things in a polite way, but in a direct way, to say what I think, and to also try to have what I expect should be my recognition, for example.
Rein, without stating the obvious, which we've done already, that you are a man talking at a Women in Science event, I said at the very start, I think some of the issues are exactly the same. If you're trying to get from a mid-career position to a higher position, and you want to try and break into that inner circle, the issues are the same. So would you agree with that? And if so, how have you gone about doing it?
It's very difficult to, because I'm not a woman, so I can't possibly answer that question. But I can, in terms of what I see, and certainly, as I said, what I heard in the earlier session, I think I think a lot of it is the anxiety and everything is probably also, you know, there's a lot of very, very successful men who are not very confident. I mean, it's almost correlated, I think. The extremely successful male scientists, when you get to know them, I mean, they have confidence issues. So for that matter, I wouldn't see, I mean, my lab has always been roughly 50-50 men, women, not by design, not because I want to be able to say that, just because that's the way it emerges. I mean, there's a bunch of guys here, so they're probably going to tell me this is not the case, but I think they deal with exactly the same issues, and you know, I try to help them in the same ways, and I see them succeed and go and do stuff. So I think it's hard for everybody. It's a very tough career. That's I think the case for everybody, and there are hurdles there, like breaking into a circle, as you mentioned. You know, for me as a cross-disciplinary person, I'm out of my comfort zone pretty often, because sometimes I get invited to a conference to give a talk in an area that I'm interested in, but certainly I'm no expert. Mm-hmm. There I am, giving a talk in front of 300 of these guys who are ready to hear what this person from outside the field has to say. And I look, you know, then maybe I get excited about that field and try to get maybe some funding eventually, which will mean that I have to break into that circle. And it's the same every time. It's like force yourself to talk to people, go and introduce yourself, accept the fact that not everybody's going to like you and want to talk to you. I think accept the fact that more things do not work than that do work, but then celebrate the ones that do work and learn from the ones that didn't work. So I think keep going. It's a, you know, the idea of I write one grant, it fails, and now I'm miserable, that just doesn't work. I mean, statistics dictate that you need to write 10 grants if you're average, and then one will succeed. Well, embrace those statistics, and then you know. So I think it's an attitude thing. There is, in my experience, and I think it would be interesting to see what the others say. But in my experience, there is actually in this job a correlation between how much you put in and what you get out. Even though many things don't work, but the more you put in, the more comes out, and that makes the job amazing. It's unique. I think there's not many jobs like that.
And I think that parallels very clearly with what was said on the first panel. So no matter what field you're in, I think the more you put in and the more you keep trying, and don't give up when you have failures, as it was put, is critical. I think from my perspective, as I was going up through my career, having lack of self-confidence was clearly there, and it came out most vividly when I went to meetings. So there was always, and I remember in the end, you know, the question of when everybody went off to dinner, would you be left sitting there on your own, or would you be able to go to dinner with somebody? And in the end, I solved it with a friend of mine by saying to each other, well, if we didn't have anybody to go to dinner with, we'd make sure that they were invited to the dinner we were going to, or vice versa, so you weren't left alone. And these are real self-confidence issues. Yeah. How do you deal with going to meetings? I'm going to start with Rein, and then I'm going to ask all of you. Because I think it's, you know... I
mean, I set myself, like, tasks, like... And now it's different. I mean, now I usually know a few people, and it's easier to go and talk to them, and then they introduce you to somebody else, etc. But in the beginning, especially, you know, as a postdoc, and also, you know, sometimes going deliberately to a meeting to learn something new instead of to a meeting where I already knew some people, I set myself tasks at the start of the day. So I would say, like, right, today I'm going to talk to 10 people. I don't care who they are. I'm going to introduce myself to 10 people. And then I would just tick them off and say, wow, that's accomplishment, and then something comes out of that. And I don't know, I'm not naturally a person who just walks up to people and talks to them. So I had to just think of tricks to do it. And in the beginning, it's weird and awkward, and actually talking about it now, it sounds a bit awkward when I hear myself saying this, but it works, because eventually it becomes second nature. It's like, actually, most people are not going to be aggressive or dismissive or whatever. Most people actually like to have a chat, and so. But in my experience, there are kind of two types. There were two people who I really looked up to when I was doing my postdoc and starting my assistant professor job. And I met them both at the same conference. And one embraced me and said, not literally, but embraced what I was trying to do, and said, like, right, you're going to be, and this person still writes my letters today. You know, that was early on. And the other person was really tough. And I still don't know what it meant, but he was trying to suggest maybe you shouldn't move into this field. This person I had to work on for a very long time, and this is now a very good relationship, but that was a very different start. And I think you come across those people, the people who are comfortable sharing their area and understand that more will come out, or people who say, no, this is my field, you go and do something else. So, but.
And Michal, for you, I'm sure for you and Elisa, it's quite often you go to meetings and it must be a male-dominated
completely male-dominated. So right now, in meetings that I know people, I often organize the outings actually, because this way there is no tension. So and I get to go with whoever I wanted, and I think it's also people like that someone organizes it. Right. But I could not agree more with what you said. Everything, including the to-do list. When you go to a new conference, I actually had a little bit more specific to-do list. I remember going through when you have the participants at the end of the book, I actually made sure I met with those people. Mm. I did focus only on technical. Meaning I made sure that I talked to these people and asked them for 5 minutes of their time, and I had slides, and I talked to them about the recent results. About the dinner, it is an issue, but honestly, it's really not that important, because most often people go with people that they know already. It's not a career development thing. It's just something that you feel comfortable at that moment.
I think it's a self-esteem thing, isn't it?
Yeah. No, but it's not. It's really not important. I completely understand the feeling, but at the end of the day, it is not important.
Right.
So I made up my mind at some point in the career, if I don't know anyone, I'll go by myself. But it's important to realize it's really not important, but it doesn't feel very good.
Elisa, for you?
Yeah, for me, I think a little bit like she says, I organize before the meeting. So I look who I want to meet at the meeting, also because I feel maybe awkward to try to introduce myself in order to avoid that. I look who I want to talk to. I email before, and before the meeting, I present myself. I send a paper if I want to discuss something, and I ask to meet at a specific time. And they usually, as you say, people are actually nicer than you think. And so most of the time, so that maybe I go to a meeting, I meet 3-4 crucial for me in that moment people, and that's how I operate. And for the dinner, I also don't pay too much attention. If I found somebody, I didn't prefer to go with somebody I like, or a friend, or a colleague. I like to, I'm Italian, I like to eat with people I like and I know very well and relax. I don't like too much business dinner.
One of the things that we really want to put an emphasis on today is to climb up. So each of you have gone through the assistant, associate, full professor, and obviously have achieved great things at that. Can you put yourself back for a minute to when you were an associate professor? I mean, for most faculty, the first thing is to get tenure, right? To get promoted from your assistant professor to your associate professor step. I hear from a lot of women, and I think it was true for myself as well. At that point, sometimes you get if there are any advantages for a junior faculty, they go away. And often at that point, you've got tenure now, will you be on this committee, will you be on that committee? Could you talk a little bit, each of you actually, about at that stage in your careers, how you managed that, how you managed to say no to doing too many of those administrative tasks so that you could keep your own academic careers on track and move, and what was your goal to move forward to become a full professor? Michal, you're looking at me, so maybe
No, I'm just thinking, I do remember being in a little bit of a crisis when I got to the associate professor, because then, and it was also a time where I felt I was already known, and I came to a stage where I felt, wow, I made it. So then what do I do now? So it felt a little bit. So I changed. I went more courageous in terms of fields. That's what tenure does give you.
Mm-hmm.
That you can go wilder. So I did, yeah. And regarding committees, I don't remember this being, that the department, in the end, after the 3-year review, the department was wonderful. So after the big cold shower, everything was wonderful. So they actually really treated, they were very good to me. So
could you just expand a little bit when you said you went wild? I mean, it was commented earlier that in academia, you can't just change tracks. In the first panel, the women were talking about how they'd changed their career tracks to quite a large extent. In academia, you're staying in academia, but you changed the topic you were working on more?
I made a point of meeting, I had a few theory people
Mm-hmm.
that somehow relate to me, to my area. And I met with them on a regular basis and tried to convert whatever their crazy theories to real life and what could it mean. And I don't think I had the bandwidth nor the courage to do that before. So because these were like wild, I mean, these theorists, they can, often they can really assume anything, but the payoff is very high,
Right.
Sometimes.
So some more high risk.
So
big
much higher
payoff
risk,
research.
yes, much higher risk, yeah.
Rein, what about yourself?
Yeah, I think because I went through the UK system, and the tenure thing is a little bit less of a big deal, because you have, there is a probation period, and at the end of that, you go through the ranks of lecturer, senior lecturer, reader, full professor. That is similar in some ways, but the actual tenure is not the difference between you stay or go or becoming permanent. That happens at an earlier stage. So I think that real stress point I didn't have. I think for me the whole thing has been, looking back, quite reasonably. I don't know, stepwise. Every step, I guess I took on a little bit more, and I both scientifically and just embracing more things and learning how to navigate more, and it just became. And at some point, I think I thought, right, now I'm doing indeed a little bit too much of this admin stuff, because I'm now sitting on a lot of appointment committees, etc. And yeah, that's nice. People clearly think I am of some value there, but that's not my job really. So at some point, I had to think like, okay, who am I really? Who do I really want to be? And where do I want to go? And then I think the world looks a little bit different, because then you start to, it becomes easier to prioritize and to say no. And I think saying no is actually one thing that me and many of my academic friends are very bad at. But it's actually really important to be able to stay focused. And in this job now as well, I mean, as you're fully aware, there's so much coming our way. And it's so this prioritization, and so that's, I think, something I've really learned by going through the various steps. Learn, really try to understand what I really want to do, where's the value, and really try not to touch anything that's not going to add anything. I think it was mentioned earlier today also, like, meetings where you go in and you come out and you feel exactly the same. They're probably not worth having, and trying to avoid that. And so it's a learning thing. I think
I do that all the time in my administrative side of my career. Yeah. Elisa, would you put yourself back to that stage?
Yeah, so I think I felt, I felt well, in the sense that I also, having the tenure it feels like an accomplishment in the US academia, so I felt more self-confident, and so that helped me to also to enter in a meeting feeling more important, or to be able to say more what I think, or to do a little bit more of high-risk research. So I didn't have a negative impact. So the department didn't charge me more because of the tenure. I didn't feel that at all. Actually, the department was pretty nice with me throughout my career. Actually, I was saying before, they were talking about how many women there are, or how little women there are, no, in the academia. So in physics at Georgia Tech, in the whole history, there have been only 2 full professors, and I'm one of these 2. And still, I don't think there are no more yet. So it's really true that we are like rarity. So in that sense, they treat me nicely.
Right. So I would assume that you think it's important that women rise through the ranks and get to the higher levels of the
It's
academy.
important, yes, yes. I think it's having more women in not only in academia, in science, in every business, as we have seen it before, in every field. I think it's very important, because I think we certainly are bringing a different perspective, a different way of working, living, and thinking, because I believe, I do believe in a difference. So I don't think women and men are perfectly the same. I do believe we have some differences, and these are added value. So I don't think we should become like men, because I think what we are bringing is actually something very good. We have an ability to collaborate, generally speaking. I don't want to say something bad against the men here, because, but generally speaking, I think women tend to be more collaborative. They have maybe less big egos that brings them to collaborate in a nicer way. And I think there has been even research showing, like, how companies that they have at least 3 women among the higher ranked, they generate more income, they have a better reputation, they invest more in innovation. And there have been research showing that this comes from the diversity. So even not only women and men, but also a different background, or different, black, white, Indian, of a different background brings in a group a better problem-solving outcome. So
in all walks of life. Correct? I mean, the more diverse, the more open people can have. Do you think there's any advantages that women have?
Absolutely.
Okay. Let's hear about that.
Absolutely. I mean, I often, a scenario where I do feel, and I'm going to generalize, and I'm apologizing for the men here, but there are scenarios where I feel that simply the fact that I was born a woman, there is an advantage. This is very in general, I'm sorry I'm generalizing, but the social skills that women have are invaluable. To be smart and driven, this is all a prerequisite. And anything on top of that adds. So, for example, going to meetings with program managers and understanding, trying to listen to what they want, what they really want. Very rarely they will tell you exactly what they want. These are like nuances. They speak in general terms, and they have a preference for this subject than that subject. And if I go with my male colleagues, often my male colleagues will naturally push what they want to sell. But that won't work. You have to listen to what the program manager wants. This is just as an example. that I do think there is that sensitivity. There are plenty of men that do have it, but in general, women have it.
More.
Yeah.
I think that's probably true. Before we go to questions, Rein, there's just one area I wanted to ask you about, and I know that through your research, it's led to you becoming more entrepreneurial and spinning off a company. And I wonder if you could tell a little bit about why do that, and whether you think that helps you in your career, in your academic career, to do that.
Okay.
You weren't expecting that.
No. This is not loaded in any funny way. This is no. This okay. That's yeah. So that's a. I think. Well, to me, I don't really. One of the things we're trying to achieve also with this building is to get lots of people excited about science, and I think science is. I understand that science as your stereotype, a geek in a lab is not exciting. I get it, but that's really not what it has to be like at all. There's so much more to it. You can actually contribute to solving problems. You actually make something rather than just moving money around, what a lot of people call a career. So I think that needs to be embraced, and doing the entrepreneurial thing actually takes you a step closer to really doing that full thing of discovering something in the lab to eventually seeing it out there and people using it. So we've done this, and it was not expected at the time. In 2005, one of my students discovered this peptide that formed gels, and we thought, hey, that's cool. Someone had suggested, why don't you patent it? We did. We found out, we started talking to different people, found some uses for it, and we have now a company based on this concept. And actually that story, if you tell kids about that's what it can be, you can actually make things that change, that can become real products. It can change things. It's a real exciting, interesting career. So I think that's to me, my students know this. When you invent something, yes, dream about your Nature or Science paper, but also think about patenting and think about the entrepreneurial possibilities. It just enriches the whole thing, and it also means that we start to do, I think, to an extent, what we should be doing. Help solve big problems. So yeah, for me, that's something I knew nothing about and learned on the way. Still learning, obviously, but it's added a really interesting new arm to my career and my research. So it's something I would certainly recommend people consider.
One sentence, perhaps, from each of you about a word of advice for women who are trying to get to the next level or to break into that inner circle. Is it about character? Is it about being brave? Is it about what word of advice would you give?
Okay. I think, it came out also from the previous panel, I think, that certainly endurance and being able, not to be depressed by failure, but actually to see failures as a moment to maybe rethink yourself and even be better or just keep going and be empowered by a failure, I think is very important, because otherwise you don't. I think that's clearly one thing, and self-confidence as well. Believe in yourself is definitely a key thing.
Michal?
I would say, if it's one sentence, I would say to aim high, always aim the highest, and don't let anyone put you down.
Yeah, I would say try to understand who you are and where you want to go. As soon as you know exactly who you are with, your the full package and where you want to go, it becomes important, because often actually you find that you are going places where you maybe don't necessarily want to go. So that it doesn't have to be very well defined, but I think that helps a great deal.
So let's open it up for questions. I'm sure we have these fabulous scientists here. I'm sure there's some questions in the audience. Yeah.
you here and see that you are all from another country, if I'm not mistaken. Which is great, because I'm from the Netherlands too, and I want to make it here. And the US has this force that pulls a lot of scientists towards them. And I was wondering if you guys could comment on things that advanced your career, because it's typical US, or especially for women, things that might be sort of against you, because in a previous panel discussion we heard about parental leave being included if you work at the Girls Who Code, and that's great, but that's, for instance, normal in the Netherlands and a lot of other countries, so that might be working against you. In comparison, in the Netherlands, just this report came out this week that even though there's an equal number of applicants for federal grants, women are 14% less likely to get them just because they're female, which might work against you if you're a scientist in the Netherlands. And I don't know what the divisions are here, but I was wondering if you could comment on, I don't know, things that helped you here in the US, or things that you're particularly struggling with because you're here in the US.
Any takers?
Okay.
I can do the Dutch perspective if you want. I'll leave the women in science perspective to my colleagues here. But I think, in general, the European perspective versus US. What I love about here, and New York is maybe more so than anywhere else, is the kind of why not attitude. So you propose something, and yeah, okay, sounds good. You do this in many European countries, what you get is that will never work. And that is so discouraging. So I think that's, for me, one thing that makes the US a very good place to be a scientist and to be entrepreneurial. And so I think there are, in my experience, there are fewer barriers. Also, from the Dutch perspective, after having done the UK for about 15 years, we're known for being quite direct. You get that here too, which I think is very, very helpful. That you don't waste time. When people don't want to do something, they will let you know. That's very helpful, and it's kind of obvious that that's the way you would interact. Well, as you know, that you don't get that everywhere, and I think here that works really well. So you can very quickly move on to the next thing. It doesn't work, fine, okay, try something else. So that's my experience.
Michal, any experience?
If you are debating where to end up, I would just choose the best for your career. Where is the best place to do your science? And you'll be fine. That's, because, there are many places that are considered equal. I lived in Brazil, I lived in Israel, and what goes underneath is really what matters. And that's actually pretty hard to quantify. So just choose the best for your science. That would be my advice.
Other question?
All of you are senior in career, and I assume you have trailing spouses. How do they feel about
Michal, this is a question for you.
So I actually moved to Columbia. That was honestly my biggest achievement in my career. With my husband and my ex-husband. And actually, that could have, it is unusual, but I'm actually pretty surprised that it is unusual, because I have kids. I'm sure it's actually pretty common. I have a kid. I'm divorced like a very large percentage of people, so how come this is not a problem? So what to deal with? So I did it twice, right? For Cornell, right? We moved as a two-body, and for Columbia we moved as a three-body. So advice, right? So for advice for the
Don't
two-body.
get divorced again, Michal. It will become more difficult.
I can do it. For the two-body.
You said go where it's best for your science.
Yes.
But was it best for all three of your science?
Okay. So we chose Columbia because it was the best for the three of us. But this is a part. I'm not going to dwell on that because it's obviously it's not a. But the two-body. I have very specific advice for that. So I would not try to coordinate when you go job hunting. It's impossible. And so just apply. Pretend you are on your own. He or she are on their own. Your partner is on your own. And then negotiate. And then make sure that you are at a stage where the department really wants you. And that's important, not to say anything before. They talk about their kids, they talk about their husbands, their wives, usually the wives, and you stay put. But because, and that's a subtlety, but it's really important because there is a lot of internal politics and push to actually support you. You want to be at that stage. And only then you raise the issue.
Elisa,
Yeah.
would you want to
Yeah,
comment?
I also have only one husband. For now, at least. So maybe it's a little bit easier, but but I also went to Georgia Tech. My husband was a postdoc when I was hired at Georgia Tech. He was hired as a postdoc, and then he became assistant professor at Georgia Tech, and that clearly was related to my position, was an issue, because in the United States, if you're a postdoc in a university, it's very hard to become a professor in the same university. I don't know if it is the same everywhere, but certainly at Georgia Tech was impossible, a rare case to be postdoc and then assistant professor. So that was a little bit of a problem, I must say. But in the end, we made it working, so it was good. And then when we moved here, I follow her advice.
Yeah.
And another thing is true that it's, at least for me, every case is different. But for me, what I have learned also was, based on Georgia Tech experience, that it's never nice to be the trailing spouse, because you feel like, maybe you are less important than the first spouse. So from our experience, that was something that was not particularly well received by my husband. So when we moved here, the idea was more like, okay, we independently look for our jobs, and then after we see, without too much emphasis into like negotiating, okay, create a position for him here. We felt more like, if naturally comes, means it's going to happen. If it doesn't naturally come, maybe it's not the right move for us to do. So I think it's a compromise, because also it's hard, you enter in a department and there is the feeling that the department, I have Elio Tosatti gave me an advice, only go where people really want you. You can go to the hell, he said. You can go to hell as long as they really want you. I think it's a good advice, because if you go in a place where people are really happy and they want you, then something good will happen. So the trailing spouse need to be really wanted in the place where he's going.
I'll show up a different perspective.
Okay, very good.
So because you're right, every case is its own case. I'm not sure how much my department really wanted me originally,
Cornell.
at Cornell. I think they wanted me, but it wasn't a complete unanimous. It wasn't. And it's okay. You prove them wrong, or whoever were the people that voted, you prove them wrong, and it's fine. It's a challenge, but it's okay. Usually people are not, there is nothing personal. They just don't, not sure that you're going to succeed. You succeed, you prove them wrong. And I remember that my ex-husband was a trailing spouse, and he gave up different other positions for this, and he felt very mixed feelings about the trailing spouse. But same thing, you know, in the beginning, he felt like I remember him joking that he used to, that he's walking with, hey, I'm 50% off, right? Because the department paid the 50% of his, but very quickly he became very well known, and you know, I think today nobody even remembers who was it really spouse.
But to address what you've just said, I think that comes down to an issue of self-confidence again. To be able to say, you know, some people in the department may not want me, but that's okay, I'll prove them wrong. You've got to have that self-confidence component to say, I can show them, you know, they'll want me soon enough, right? Other questions? Yeah.
This is clearly a fabulous group of women in the audience. And the mentorship and role models that are here are surely important for all of us. But who really needs to be in the room is the men. And one or two, we have three, who are great. And I hope many of you got to talk to them too, because they have perspectives that we need to hear. And also men, as we've heard and know, in every sector are predominant in the higher policy levels of whatever's going on. So unless they have daughters or working wives or an attuned sense of what's going on, they need to hear this as much, if not more, than we do. How do we get more men in the room?
Shelley, you have to answer that. Use the mic, Shelley.
My daughter is a two-body problem, and it didn't work out the first time, and she has a second partner. So, Michal, it's like you. However, it is very different for men and women. The primary difference is, this is from the National Science Foundation reports on the status of women in science, that about 40, for women, 80% of their partners are in science, whereas for men, it's closer to 40%. From my own experience, I didn't have my first woman PhD student until 1988. I'd had 19 men in a row, not a single woman, and I went to China because I had seen that there were many women there that were very strong theoretically. I've had now 17 women PhD students out of 26, so they have been the majority. What has happened, and this is, I guess, the question for you, is that what they have done after getting the degree seems to be changing, and it's changing in a way that's disturbing. In the beginning, almost all the women went into academia. In the last 5 years or so, what's happened is that many of the women are no longer going into academia. Even in the new fields like biomedical engineering, where 39% of the PhD now are female, also very high in chemical engineering. I think in physics it's only 12. It's lower. But the point is that if you look at the new faculty positions that are being filled, they are only present in about one half. So 20% of the new faculty are women in biomedical engineering. We're close to 40%. Now, this has been happening to my own students, and so I'm trying to understand what the obstacles are and why things are evolving this way. Some of them people have raised the questions already, that the young women PhD students look at our female faculty, they see how they live, how hard it is, and I thought the main issue is having a family, like somebody asked already. I don't think that is the central question anymore. But I think the central question, what's been happening, is that funding is so difficult that women don't want to put out such risk of family and things like that at the same time. So being a new faculty member at this time for women basically seems to be just a greater burden in terms of what their dreams are. than it is for men. And I'm curious about two things that I'd like to hear your answers to. First of all, is your lab, being women, does your lab predominantly attract women graduate students? And secondly, what are your women PhD students doing now that once they get their degrees?
Okay. Elisa?
Okay. It's true. There are not too many women PhD students. There are not too many women PhD students. I had only one, and she decided she graduated, but then she went to teach. She decided to have a career in teaching in high school. So she said that, similar to what you say, it's too hard, she wanted a family, because it's timing sometimes critical, because by the time you finish the PhD, you are 29, 28, depending, no? But it's a time when you really want maybe a family, you want to get married, have children, and that's the time to look for a postdoc, maybe move in another country. If your partner is not a scientist, it's not an option to go to Europe to do a postdoc. It can be challenging. But I had postdocs that are female, and they have two of them have a position, academic position, but they're not American. So one is from Taiwan and one is from Korea. So they went back to their country.
And Michal, the makeup of your lab, male, female?
About 30% are women. About 30%. 30%. Yes. It's about 3 or maybe less, maybe a little less, maybe a quarter. But
is that high for Cornell?
I think it's good. It could be better.
The men faculty have the same proportion or less?
I don't really feel that I attract more women than my other faculty, except if they are really old-fashioned, never met a woman scientist. But if they're, my contemporaries,
Rein, what about your makeup of your lab, isn't it?
My lab is, as I mentioned earlier, is actually very close to 50-50 and has always been. But
and are your postdocs going on to academia?
That is, I think I would say that the number is, we've got 5 people who went on to faculty positions, 1 female, 4 male. I hope that number is too small to do statistics on. Yeah. For the rest, I think the people who come through my group, they end up in industry or doing additional postdocs. I hope that when they leave my lab, they feel equally equipped, regardless of where they come from. I mean, that's. I think, well, you can speak with them. A number of them are here, but I in my group, I really find it hard to distinguish between levels of ambition, levels of productivity. And that maybe I'm lucky in terms of who's applied to come and work in my lab. But what's also nice is when new people come who want to have a look around in my lab. I of course try to sell my lab. Of course, I would do, but I always make sure that they get a lot of time with the group. And I think we have a culture of. I really believe that we have a culture where this is hopefully not so. Where it matters less, that at least there's a bit of confidence building during the PhD or postdoc. Then it's back to the real world where things are maybe not exactly as we want them to be. But I personally think this is it's possible to have a lab where these things matters less. Now I have to say what feeds into my lab comes from maybe areas where there are more women. I mean, I'm not a pure physicist, so I'm sure it would have been different in that area.
Look, I think this is a conversation that could clearly go on for a long time. I think we have wine and refreshments outside, so why don't we thank our panel and continue the conversation over a glass of wine. Thank you very much.